All right, so now I'm gonna talk about the monthly event survey, which Stefan mentioned a couple of minutes ago. The monthly event survey is a project through which we administer a monthly instrument to almost 4,000 panelists who are 50 years or older. We started this since May of 2019. And the way it works is that the first of every month, panelists who are part of this sub-panel get an invitation to answer the survey. They have the full month to answer it, but most people answered within the first few months. Sorry, in the first few days of the month. So when they get the survey, they answer questions about their subjective well-being and also a bunch of things about what happened in the prior month. So we ask about subjective well-being, self-reported health, their labor force status, how many hours they worked, their earnings, their levels of pain, health-related expenses. And then we also ask about a number of possible life events, whether they experienced one of these 17 major things that may have happened. The main objective is to add substantial amounts of core information that can be linked to others in other parts of the UAS. In particular, it was designed with the HRS in mind and to try to investigate to what extent having a short but very high frequent survey could add and complement what you get from long but lower frequency surveys like the HRS. Another objective was to power the triggered burst that we just heard about. And then the most obvious thing is it allows us to study changes of things that happen at a higher frequency, with a very good example being the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. Since we started since March of 2019, we have a few months of pre-pandemic data. So what I'm going to show you, instead of just showing you the list of variables that we have, I'm just going to show you what the trends are in some of these variables. And in all of these graphs, there's a line at 0, which means April of 2020, so the start of the COVID pandemic. Here you have the fraction worked. There's a relatively low fraction work because it's only people who are 50 or over, so there's many retirees in this sample. But you can see before the pandemic about 40% worked, and then there's a sharp drop in March of 2020, and you can see how it evolves after that. We also asked about monthly earnings. So this is income that comes only income that comes from work, and you see again the drop at the start of the pandemic. Overall life satisfaction, people became very, their well-being dropped substantially in April, but then also recovered very fast. So in a couple of months, for most people, they were back to their levels of life satisfaction that they had before the pandemic. This is overall health. We ask about self-reported health. You don't see many changes throughout the pandemic. But here, more interesting is a question derived from the life events, where we ask whether the respondents suffered the onset of an illness or an injury. Here, what you see is actually when the pandemic started, the number of people experiencing new illnesses or injuries fell dramatically, right? Because they were mostly at home, so they have less opportunities for injuries and so on. But then also they found out less of illnesses that they may have had because they didn't go to the doctor. So there's a recovery later as they find out of all the illnesses that they hadn't get diagnosed during those months. We ask about pain and level of pain. And then I'm just going to show you one graph or an example from a paper I'm working on with Arce on life satisfaction among two groups. So here the strategy is very easy because we have the data from before the pandemic. And what we're trying to find out is how life satisfaction differed for two different groups of people. So here we're comparing people who had access to the safety net, who had access to unemployment insurance and other benefits, and people who didn't. And what we see is like that everybody got a very sharp drop in their life satisfaction at the start of the pandemic. But then people who had access to the safety net recovered very fast and got to levels of satisfaction comparable to before the pandemic, and those who didn't did not. Just one of many things you can do with this data. So that was actually the figure I was showing you. We ask about a range of monthly events. There's old history of studying life events, but usually the focus is you get to a person and later in life and asked about a very detailed questions about what has happened to them throughout their lives. We have a different approach here. We only ask about a small, relatively small set of possible life events, but we have much higher frequency since we're only asking about the prior month. And the obvious advantage is that the period of recall is greatly reduced because they just have to remember what happened to them in the prior month rather than throughout their life. We ask about 17 events, including good and bad things that can happen to you. And for people who say that they did experience that life event in the prior month, we ask, in some cases, follow-up questions particular to try to get at what the type of event it was. So for example, if you did get an illness or injury, we ask what type of illness or injury it was, and then we also ask for the exact date when that happened. This is the list of events. As you can see, there are some positive and negative events, and also some pretty common events. The probability of getting a new illness or going on a vacation is relatively common. Most people are going to experience that in any given year, but then our other events are much rarer. Again, we also make an effort to make it easy to use this data. We have a panel data set that you can easily find. It's set up as a panel data, so each record is a person per wave. So each panel has up to 45 observations, ranging from May of 2019 to February of 2023. And it's updated monthly. It includes all of the variables from the individual surveys, but it also has some constructed variables such as earnings and hours worked. Thank you.